What's up? I'm Austin.
I am Aloysius.
Hi, I'm Jiawei.
Hi, I'm Kenneth.
Hi, Zain here.
And today we're going to talk about Kanban versus Scrum, pros and cons. So, what do you guys think?
And
When
anyone
we're
that
talking about Kanban, are we referring to like actual Kanban or like the Kanban we're looking at?
What kind of Kanban are we looking at? The
It should
X
be for the
version,
R&D.
maybe someone can pull out the
Kanban,
definition.
the weird Kanban, or the
It's
ever-present Scrumban.
let's just talk about the R&D Kanban from Mr. Anderson.
Now, what does
So
R&D
we're
Kanban
talking
look
about
like?
Kanban method.
Yes, the Kanban method in R&D, because if you talk about Kanban in operational or manufacturing, then that's also quite a different kind of thing. And you cannot compare that to Scrum.
How
So
does
maybe
how does
yes.
how does R&D Kanban differ? If Kenneth can give us like maybe a brief.
Okay, so the challenge for the R&D Kanban is that each of the ticket will contain quite a different kind of entity as compared to this operational. So every time you have a work package, it's almost the same or exactly the same work package. So that's the main difference between this operational Kanban and the R&D Kanban. And the challenge always is how to granularize each of this R&D Kanban, because yeah, how can you compare this? This is about the same size as the other one, whereas operational is the tolerance is quite defined between one size to another for the operational Kanban, and it's almost like you're talking about physical things in operational Kanban, such as a workpiece. But R&D Kanban is always almost like ideas. Like, for example, a software program or what do you call this? An algorithm. It's really hard to compare one algorithm than to the next one, or maybe UI. So that's the challenge in R&D Kanban.
Yeah, but what is the understanding for like for many people? Many people here that about Kanban, probably the work
Yeah,
week limits. I think that's the key.
yeah. One
Um,
thing is WIP limits. Yes, correct.
yeah. So yeah, maybe we can just go with that, and we have different columns as far as I can remember. I think the different columns are uh
Yeah.
dependent on the kind of work, and also the different might have an expedite swim lane, that sort of thing.
Mm.
So basically, I think that's
So first, maybe I'll ask this question: who among us here have experience using or have seen R&D Kanban in action?
I've
Does anybody have experienced it here?
Oh, not me. Mine
I've,
all operational.
I've used it, but used it before, but I'm not sure whether it's called R&D Kanban or not. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't personally used it, but I've seen teams where they try and use Kanban.
Mm.
But it was quite at like a very infant and initial state.
Okay. So I guess it's only me who have more or less experienced it in a team with almost a year of data in, in this R&D Kanban. Okay, then probably I'll touch more on Kanban, but for Scrum, yeah, you can, whatever your view is, then let's just hear it out.
Then, in that case,
Okay.
looking at the other side of the coin, should we also be talking about R&D Scrum?
Is there such
No,
a
Scrum started in anyway software development or R&D, so it's okay. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. You're correct. We'll focus on this R&D Scrum and R&D Kanban.
I think Scrum is quite clear that we can just follow the Scrum guide as a reference for Scrum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So
for this,
just now we were yes.
okay, so for me, I think R&D and operational is very similar, at least based on my experience. So I
Okay.
don't think there is really a vast difference unless maybe anyone has any different experience.
It's for me, it's quite a vast difference, as I have said, because in R&D, every day it's a new thing. In operational, it's always the same. Every week, it's the same. For whether you're talking about Kanban or Scrum, the challenge is you'll never know if the requirement is very hard to fulfill during your development or during where you're processing your ticket. Whereas if it's in the operational mode, you can always compare even for yourself, like I did this in 20 minutes, then for the next round it's the same, but yeah, it's still around 20 minutes, plus minus some kind of percentage. So that's operational. Whereas if it's in R&D, it's always different every now and then. Yes, Chawei.
I think let's talk about like how easy it is to use, or like if we think it's easy for the teams to use it, because I feel like just now Kenneth brought a point where, generally if you're using Kanban method in R&D, sometimes there's the expectation that all of the tickets or stories in the Kanban are of the same size.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
Yes. Yeah.
So but my question or my challenge is it really necessary? Because I mean, obviously when we do Scrum, there's always the hope, or we want to use something in order to kind of have an idea whether everything fits within capacity for the sprint. But there's nothing written in the Scrum guide that says we have to use story points. There are people who use t-shirt sizing or other ways as well. So does that mean that if in Kanban it's necessary to have all the tickets or everything in the same kind of like a same size, that it'll be actually harder for the teams to really adopt, because there's a greater learning curve in trying to size their stories a certain size?
Yeah, exactly. So that's actually the cons of a Kanban. It's really hard and to put the discipline, because if you don't size it, then whip limits is useless. For example, if one topic or one story or one ticket is very large, whereas the other one is just maybe one day, then how can you say that I only can have two whip limits or one whip limit? So that's the hard, and that's actually one of the cons of using this Kanban methodology.
But then I have a question. If we're talking about like week limits, because a lot of Scrum teams, they actually rely on Kanban boards to visualize the work they have in a sprint. And when they use that, or when they use a Kanban board, they can also put WIP limits for each column that the ticket goes through. Then isn't that like the best of both worlds? Like a Scrum team, but like using a Kanban board.
Yes, that's already, you can say, Scrumban. But again, if you are using the proper Kanban, then you can't use, in that case, your CFD or cumulative flow diagram. If your stories, if you're using points, right, and in a Scrum, in a sprint, you'll have different points in each ticket. It's okay to use this a little bit of Kanban-ish, but it's not really the proper Kanban. But don't use it. Don't use CFD to look at your progress and how you are delivering, or how you are looking at your flow of your work system in your Kanban. So in a Scrum setting, you can only look in your Kanban board per sprint. But in Kanban, it's much more longer. It's much more continuous. Hence, it's also can be useful if you are, for example, doing some debugging and not just for or maintenance and not just for R&D. But it's yeah, I agree with you. It's really hard and it's really you need to have your discipline in making your Kanban system work. Whereas in Scrum, it's a little bit much more structured, especially if you're using what story points and burn down charts, which is actually not from Scrum but from extreme programming, but they are generally accepted anyway. So that's really the challenge between Scrum and Kanban. The cons, so the pro of Scrum, it's much more simpler to use. You have your Scrum guide and it's much more easier to follow as compared to Kanban. So that's the pro of Scrum and the con or the disadvantage of Kanban.
I think to look at it from the flip side, right? If we're talking about overhead, like manpower overhead count, those kind of things, I think Kanban might have less typical overhead than a typical Scrum team. Because Scrum team, then you have other roles like product owner, Scrum master, which
Yes,
I think
indeed.
as huge overhead because it's one extra account doing things. But definitely they do provide some value, but at the same time, just having them necessitates a different process altogether. So it's overhead. So I would say that's one of the pros of Kanban. We have very little or much lesser structural overhead. But then all this kind of overhead then becomes a sort of hidden, I suppose, in some extent.
Yeah. So exactly as you are saying, Austin. So this is the pro of Kanban is that you don't Kanban you can use one person, two person, three-person. It's okay. But Scrum you implement it in a three-person team. You can't. It's much more. Yeah, you need a lot of overhead if you're using Scrum. So that's also this is a flip side. So the advantage of Kanban is that you can implement Kanban in one, two, three, or less than 5%, whereas Scrum, in order to get the most benefit of it, you need to implement Scrum in around 5 to 7 person team.
But I think it would really also heavily depend. Maybe one more thing is perhaps, I don't know if this is the correct term to say, maybe a maturity of the team members also. Because sometimes, example, yes, Kanban might be useful in terms of, in a sense, less overhead or manpower. But example, if you have everyone constantly always asking and constantly speaking to the customer, then just randomly pulling in tickets, you might unknowingly accidentally overload the team. So it might be helpful for a point of view where the product owner in a sense have to regulate it. Or if the Kanban team already has a proper process, let's say like not anyhow pulling tickets, then fair enough from that aspect. So it will really depend on configuration also, I would believe.
Yeah, but in Kanban you can't put any tickets, right? You're always constrained by weight limit. So why does it matter?
As in like pulling into the not the whip but the backlog itself.
But backlog is backlog, then it's all about prioritization. So why would it matter into a team?
So I think if we go back to that, because just now Austin was saying, oh, maybe like when we use Kanban, we don't have like a particular product owner role, but the product owner is the one who prioritizes like the product backlog, or they own like the product backlog. So in general, actually, we do see similarities. That Kanban also needs someone needs to have the responsibility of prioritizing the backlog and making sure that the backlog is maintained, because that's the only single source of truth the Kanban team relies on, and they take whatever that's on top. So I think because we were talking about like, people working together. So maybe like 3 people working together for Scrum. Kanban, you can have a 1 person, a 2 person, a 3 person. But I think Aloysius brought out a point for Kanban where, he was saying that it's good for swarming because you all work on the highest priority tickets. But to like kind of think from that point of view, isn't like Scrum kind of better because there's more like swarming, more people working together on the same thing versus like Kanban, maybe like only 1 person is working on it. It's very rare to see, I guess. I haven't seen yet a bigger team really. And usually when we have a bigger team using Kanban, then maybe like WIP limit increases and therefore like they start pulling in more stuff? Would Aloysius like to elaborate?
Yes, I think Kanban doesn't mean less people. I think sometimes Scrum can be less people than Kanban. So the key is Kanban, even if you have a lot of people, the thing is Kanban don't specify cross functionality. So it can be like certain people can only work on certain columns. So that's why at certain stage, yeah, maybe I think that because of the weight limit, there's only those few people that can work on it. So I think that's the key. So it can look like a large team, but yeah, you want to.
No, I think it's very interesting that Aloysius brought out that, oh, it doesn't have to be a cross-functional team. Then I just feel like that can be a side topic on its own. Like a lot of
Yeah.
times when we talk about agile, we talk about how cross-functional the team needs to be, right? So doesn't that mean that if you have a Kanban team that's a specialized skill set, then people will start questioning, isn't that waterfall if like this team does this and then they hand it over to the other team to do something else?
But this is
Considering we're like the agile podcast, so
now
so I was
because
thinking if
they
you want
share the same board, right? So even though they are not specialists like designers and QA people, so I think, but they share the same big picture, which is the Kanban board. So I think they will be looking at the big picture. I think that helps. I think that sort of helps.
how does it work if like people with completely different skill sets are sharing the same board though?
Okay, so this is probably the big picture kind of Kanban. There's also like a smaller picture where the teams are more cross-functional. Yeah, so that could work also. So the key is yeah, you want to.
No, sorry, I just want to say because I think a very real problem might be if you have kind of like a cross-functional Kanban team and you're really strictly adhering to the WIP limits. What if all the higher priority tickets don't cover a part of the skill set?
Good question. So maybe I can answer that. So first is you have in your Kanban column, you have here all the things. So that's backlog. And for one ticket to go to ready, somebody will arrange and prioritize. So if that ticket is not for the team, so you can or you may reject it because it's not really for your team. An example for that is, for example, you are doing the front end, but the ticket is really for the back end, for example, or even it's not your product, it's another product, so you can reject that. Yes, Jawei.
Follow-up question. Because
Yes.
just now we were talking about having a cross-functional Kanban team though. So imagine if this Kanban team does like people who do front end, back end, designer, etc. And it just so happens that most of the top priority tickets are like front end and back end. So they pull in the front end and back end tickets, and then it meets the WIP limit already. So what's the designer going to do if they're not cross-functional enough?
I think
The designer is in the team, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, Aloysius.
I think
I'm
the
just
first
clarifying the
the first thing
question.
is to be aware you have such a thing. That team is probably blocking that row, that column is blocking. I think that's the first idea of Kanban. It's obvious to everyone because sometimes if we don't work in this kind of Kanban, it's not so obvious. So I think then whether we do anything about it, I think that's a like continuous improvement process. Yeah, well, depends on the organization. So my point is if they are not doing anything to clear the thing that's hitting the WIP, right? Then there's no point in using Kanban. So that's the key. So they have to know how to maneuver, whether they have the expertise or not. Yeah. Okay. So I think generally my idea for where I switched from Scrum to Kanban before and Kanban to Scrum before. So basically if you are able to switch from Scrum to Kanban and you are able to execute well, means you are at the, to me, Kanban is like shorter and shorter iteration until instantaneous. Yeah, so Scrum, let's say you imagine Scrum 2 weeks, Scrum then say 1 week, then daily. If you just chop off your Scrum to daily and then you just chop out until the very small chunks until now. So that's Kanban. So if you are able to do Scrum really well, there's a chance you'll be successful in Kanban, but if you are struggling in Kanban because of stakeholders, all this, then yeah, management, all these things, then it's better to go back to Scrum. So that's my thoughts on it.
It seems like there's also the element in Scrum where at least you're able to kind of have some predictability what you're gonna achieve the sprint goal at the end of the sprint, which is something you probably is harder to get from Kanban.
Yes, and also things like innovation. Let's say you already achieve your sprint goal, you want to like spend a little time thinking of how to innovative ideas. I think Scrum might help in that sense. That's like the larger scale will be safe. But, yeah.
Yeah, I agree
Cool.
also with all the points of Aloysius, except yeah, maybe one point from me is Kanban is a little bit more difficult to implement, especially if you don't have any discipline to follow through and you don't have allocation for retrospective, for example, and your prioritization in your backlog. There's no product backlog, by the way, in Kanban. So yeah, that's my
Yes.
2 cents of opinion.
You need to be very professional, very, very professional.
Mm.
Anyone else want to?
Sounds like it's easier to descend into chaos with Kanban.
For some reason, you sound very excited about it, Austin.
Me? Oh, I
You
love
need to
chaos.
relishing it.
I work in manufacturing, man. Every day is chaos.
Okay.
Well, all the best with your chaos. Before this
Firefighting.
conversation ends in chaos, should we end it here today?
Yeah.
Sounds
Let's
good.
end
Quite a
and
lot of new
yeah.
points. Very
Okay.
interesting from everyone. So I think now it's time to call it a day. So this is Austin signing out.
Bye.
Thank you. See you.